The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to our study of Steps to the Great Perfection. Kindly generate the intention to undertake this study in order to establish all sentient beings at the level of enlightenment. So having generated the attitude of bodhicitta, we're going to continue with the sixth reflection in the context of the text, which is reflecting on the, I guess we call it negativity, essentially the need to be aware of where our neurotic mind drives us and the need to address this. Obviously, we address this in terms of behavior, and because of our dispositions, then it's natural to begin with a discussion of doing. What are we supposed to do? The 10, we give up the 10 negative acts and we embrace the 10 wholesome acts. But it's also important that we recognize the role of intention in all of this. And so in Buddhism, we, of course, speak about ethics in terms of actions that are ethical, in the sense of being wholesome, constructive, and so on. But we, first of all, want to recognize that this does not come from a decree. This is not because it comes from the Buddha or it's written somewhere. It definitely was spoken by the Buddha. It is written somewhere. But it's, above all, understood in terms of what we could call phenomenology, in terms of our individual experience. And so there we can see that negative actions drive suffering and positive actions drive happiness. So in some sense, it's up to us. We can do what we want. We're free to suffer. We're free to be happy. We can choose, but we'd want to know what's what. And so the path to enlightenment, which is obviously about going beyond good and bad, it nevertheless is premised on having conditions for the path. And that is where having a happy rebirth, having happy conditions is really essential for the practice of the path, having the resources and so forth. But also, as much as we talk about positive actions replacing negative actions, what really lies in positive is the attitude behind actions. So of course we undertake positive actions as were described here, but so much of the value and the impact that actions have in terms of our consciousness, that which we carry with us from lifetime to lifetime, the imprint that is left on our consciousness has more to do with the attitude. And so, for example, engaging with anger in terms of speech and body, it leaves an imprint on the consciousness. So the actual actions have an impact and they become part of who we are. And we speak about karma in terms of something that is basic to our makeup. So of course, karma can be understood in many different ways. It's the nature of energy, but in the confused condition, this energy has an aspect of duality, which has then the nature of cause and effect. So when we have a negative action that we act upon, it then has a result. And this attitude and the result becomes part of us. And this remains in our all-ground consciousness that we carry with us from moment to moment and across lifetimes. The good thing about negative actions is that they can be purified. So as much as we have these imprints on our mind, we can change that. We can shift the nature of who we basically are through the practice of the path, free ourselves from negative patterns, free ourselves from obscuration. So it's a very workable situation. And of course, that's also what's implicit in the whole situation of confusion, is that it's not basic to who we are. But as long as we're caught in duality, it's essential that we are very attentive to our actions. So in terms of the 10 negative actions, we've covered the first 3 physical actions, and now we're on to the negative actions of the speech. Actually, before we begin, I'll just identify the teacher on the left side of your screen, where in the well springs it says 8th, in the place of the Vulture Peak mountain in Rajgir, the teacher, sublime golden light, taught a retinue of innumerable noble Shravakas endowed with miraculous powers, the teachings on the sublime Vinaya in 10,000 and numberless other sections. This was during the time when a lifespan could last 5,000 years. So this is then the teacher, sublime golden light, one of the 12 Dzogchen teachers. Idle chatter. Idle chatter involves any topic of trifling importance, not including the 3 verbal non-virtues mentioned above. After one wait a minute. No, sorry. My bad. I think we're lying. Here we go. Yeah, sorry. All right. Lying. Lying includes lies that create downfalls and excessive lies, such as pretending that one has enlightened qualities when one does not, that one has attained accomplishment when one has not, and that one understands the Dharma when one has not. So in general, we have lies which are the cause of downfalls in terms of our spiritual commitment, but there's a particular category of lies which is called actually Lame Dzun, I think in Tibetan, Ladzun. That's supposedly the worst. That's the creepy phenomenon of fake gurus who pretend that they have qualities which they don't. Something that's always delightful. Just recently was reading Andy Carr's Contemplating Reality text, is that he repeatedly comes back to examples that highlight the teachings, but that involve showing his own shortcomings. And what's so refreshing about so many of our teachers is their sort of, their eagerness to expose their shortcomings. So this is something that we want to rejoice in. And the opposite is then this creepy, embarrassing, and profoundly negative act of pretending that one has spiritual qualities when in fact one is not. So Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, such lies are exemplified by the lies of fake gurus who may state that they have seen deities when they have not, that they have attained levels of realization though they have not, or that they have supernatural powers that they do not possess. Of course, in the modern context, this plays out in slightly different ways, but nevertheless, there is ways of presenting oneself as a spiritual person which can be entirely artificial, fabricated, and so forth. Dishonesty. Jigme Lingpa continues, here one first forms the desire to tell a tale motivated by one of the afflictions, so that's one of the 3 or 5 afflictions. The execution is to show some expression through either gesture or speech and act, and the act is complete when the other person understands the meaning that was communicating. So, for example, I say, I have a profound insight, and I first initially think I want to impress this person. So that's the intention, and then the other person says, "Wow, he really is." Spiritual. And That's where the action then has been completed. The fully ripened result of lying is a rebirth in one of the three lower realms. So this obviously constructs the cause for misery. The result that resembles its cause is to be the subject of gossip. So the frame of mind that perpetuates that kind of activity is then to be surrounded by a realm of such kind of pointless talking. As the dominant result, one will be born in places that are frightening and full of deception. So this is then how it manifests in terms of rebirth. So that's lying. Actually, in Words of My Perfect Teacher, you also have, I think, some other categories in terms of lying, but yes. 5. Divisive speech. Just like the tale told in the sutras, where a fox sows discord between a bull and an ox that are friends, causing them to dislike one another, divisive speech starts off with the firm resolve of one of the afflictions, and the subsequent desire to divide those who are close or intimate, or those who have neutral relations. So sowing discord. I don't know the story about this, maybe from the Jataka tales. I don't know. If anybody knows the story of the fox sowing discord between the bull and the ox, please let me know. Well, let us know. The execution is, but by the way, don't start Googling. If you don't know, don't worry. Let's just finish the study here. The execution is to say something that is capable of creating a division or to create discord surreptitiously using mantras or substances that instigate disputes. So there's a whole science around these things. Also, like evil eyes and so forth, these kind of spells that can be cast. The act is complete when the other person understands the meaning that was communicated, in the sense that this does happen. Its fully ripened result is rebirth for the one who perpetuated this then, in one of the three lower realms. The result that resembles its cause is to have few loved ones. The dominant result is that one will inhabit uneven places that are difficult to traverse. So that was divisive speech. Harsh words. An example of a precursor for harsh words is the sight of an unattractive person or someone of low stature, meaning somebody who's despicable or that we have no respect for. Motivated by one of the three afflictions, one gets the urge to proclaim the person's faults openly and then puts this into action by saying something harsh. The act is complete when one's insult strikes his or her heart like an arrow, and its meaning has been understood. So saying something harsh, loudly, publicly, or directly, with the intention then to basically hurt the other person. It's very negative. And this can be from just rough speech to this kind of passive-aggressive thing. Let me tell you about your flaws and faults. Actually, one of the 30 advices from Longchenpa is, you might have the best of intention, and then you share your insights about somebody else's shortcomings. But he says, don't do that. You're just going to ulcerate the other person's heart. And of course, implicitly is that very often there is a tinge of something passive-aggressive that takes place. So Longchenpa says, instead, speak only kind words. And of course, what we here mean is to really have a kind heart. The thing about harsh words is that it doesn't help. Unless we're very skillful, of course, great masters, their job to challenge the clingings, fixations, and attachments of the students, expose their ego, and so forth. But that's a different kettle of fish. For ordinary sentient beings, harsh words is such a terrible thing. So its fully ripened result is the same as the aforementioned virtues. The result that resembles its cause is that one will hear many insults. As a dominant result, one will live in a place with tree stumps, thorns, and other unpleasant things. Okay, there's a question that came in here. Okay, so see if you could make the question not too long. So let's say, for example, that you have extraordinary experiences of insight. Say you have genuine realizations of the deity, of the mandala and other cities that are simply the logical fruit of past karma. That's just I'm not sure if we would call that. Well, it's the result of the practice of the path. Let's put it that way. Yeah. How would you handle those qualities? Obviously, you wouldn't parade any cities around in the interest of embellishing ego, but nor would you entirely dismiss or distrust these natural fruits of your practice. So how would you hold those jewels? Okay, I shall answer that. And allow the radiance to touch others, and yet not allow the seeds of pride to take root. I'll answer that. Is to not hold them, to not pay any attention to them. If you read the life story of Khenpo Palsang, he had all these experiences and profound insights. And during one vision, he encountered Longchenpa and received empowerments from Longchenpa. He went to his guru, and his guru said, "So did you have anything interesting happen during your retreat?" And he says, "No, nothing really." And then he actually remembered later, he came back to his teacher, "Oh yeah, by the way, I had some sort of dream about Longchenpa." Teacher just said, "Oh, that's okay. Don't cling to it." End of story. But if you look at the details in the life story, he does describe it. But the thing is, there's not any indication of clinging to it or any kind of even objectifying it. Jigme Lingpa, also our present author, he says in a teaching called The Lion's Roar, the mind that still knows what is happening is the dualistic grip of the ego. So a sage would have all these things, but would have less and less sort of going, oh, this happened, until this is continually happening, but there's no sense of there being something that's going on particularly. And the less we hold also the natural, the more actually it will touch others, and the less there'll be any seeds of pride to take root. Does an apology for harsh words purify the action at all? Well, it's really a matter of what's happening inside ourselves. But we will generally always talk about these 4 powers that are necessary for purification. And that is that we expose it to somebody, and of course it could be to the other person, yes. Then we also determine to not do it again. That's more something about ourselves. We don't have to say it. We also then are feeling regret about what we've done. And then finally, we actually consistently don't use harsh words again. So in terms of practical application. So the apology is, I guess you could say, just the beginning. But it definitely does make things easier. That's in my experience, on a very ordinary secular level, right? Yeah. So that was harsh words. Idle chatter. Okay. Idle chatter involves any topic of trifling importance, not including the 3 verbal non-virtues mentioned above. So just pointless chit-chat. After one conceives of such a topic, one of the afflictions brings about an irresistible urge to speak. We have such a good piece of goss, right? And the execution of this act may be to recite the evil mantras of the Brahmanas or the Jain treatises, or to frivolously talk about war, banditry, or other irrelevant and distracting subjects. Okay, so here it can be okay, idle chatter, as in just reciting some mantras or spells that here are seen as being not particularly enlightened. We have these kind of, it's a bit like, well, I'm speculating here, but I'm thinking it's a bit like when we sort of go, you know, oh my God, and then we have all these things, and then we start, right? So, oh my God is kind of just a colloquialism, but it actually does have its origins in terms of a particular spiritual tradition that's been then trivialized somewhat, right? And then we go on to talk about things where actually we can't change anything about. Now, the thing is, we want to be proactive in terms of helping the world, but if you notice, and especially in my generation, we get so, it's almost like we beeline straight to this place of bemoaning the situation of the world in terms of its ecology, in terms of its administration, and so forth. So very often these kind of they leave us exhausted and depressed, and it actually doesn't necessarily help. And then it also goes, Jigme Lingpa goes on to say that idle chatter also includes singing songs or putting on plays motivated by desire. So actually we could have songs and plays that have a constructive angle, that are meaningful. So we sometimes read pieces of literature or hear songs that really touch us, really have significance. They're not complete rubbish. But then there's also a culture of just placating to what people want to hear, and even depressing songs that are just really there because people are so fascinated with their own depression. So you have artists that sort of generate a culture of just bemoaning and going into depression, and people say, yeah, I really feel like that too. But it becomes a culture of just downward spiraling depressive themes. So these kind of songs are not particularly constructive. Then you also have idle chatter. There is a practitioner flattering another in order to acquire goods. So that's obviously embarrassing. The act is complete once the meaning is understood, once it has had effect. The fully ripened result of idle chatter is a rebirth in one of the three lower realms. The result that resembles its cause is that one's words will lack strength. The dominant result is that fruit trees bear no fruit. So there's a general weakness taking place. We also say, as a result of idle chatter, then when we speak, nobody really listens. Covetousness. So now we've covered the three physical, we've covered the four verbal, and now we have the three mental. So covetousness, greed. Covetousness starts with the perception of another's wealth, which causes one to experience a desirous, spiteful mindset. One hoards and clings dearly to one's own wealth. The overwhelming urge brought on by a fivefold affliction overpowers any sense of shame or wrong, and one greedily and obsessively thinks, if only I had that person's wealth. The ensuing aspiration completes the act. The fully ripened result of covetousness is the same as the previously mentioned. So, as was previously mentioned, I think the previously mentioned could refer to the previous one of idle chatter with weakness. Maybe. Same as was previously mentioned. Well, no, sorry. That's the three lower realms. Yeah, that's generally the three lower realms. The result that resembles its cause is that one's hopes will not be fulfilled. Also, if we read Trungpa's portrayal of how we perpetuate this greed, and psychologically, it's also that we operate from a point of poverty. So this experience of poverty is then something that stays with us. So we never really are happy with what we get. As the dominant results, one's prosperity will gradually diminish. So this is one's experience, both in terms of one's person and also in terms of the realm, the outer phenomena. So that's greed, wanting, right? Then there's malice. That's more on the spectrum of anger. The objective basis of malice is an individual whom one perceives as unpleasant. In essence, malice is a set of intense, enduring hatred, a vindictive mindset that continually obsesses about its object in a distorted manner, a prideful mindset that cannot tolerate harmful persons, an aggressive mindset that thinks how wonderful it would be to kill him or beat her, and a mindset that overpowers any sense of shame or wrong. So obviously this is a very aggressive, negative condition. Motivated by one of these fivefold afflictions, one applies oneself to the execution of the act, which may involve capturing, imprisoning, or murdering the individual, and so on. The act is complete when one decides to carry out the act, when one is actually able to do so. The fully ripened result of malice is a birth of one of the three lower realms. The result that resembles its cause is intense terror. As the dominant result, one will be attacked many times by both human and non-human forces. So the act is complete when you complete, imprisoning, murdering, and so on. And I think what we understood here is more that when we have carried it out, having been able to, also there is this sense of rejoicing that we're not only we've completed this act of aggression, but we're pleased about it. We could do that. Would covetousness have a specific correlation to the jealous God realm? Yeah, in terms of desire, yes, the jealous gods. But also, yes, jealous gods are really more ruled by paranoia. See, in the jealous gods also you have this one here. So it's a mixture of both the covetousness in terms of just wanting, as in desire and greed, that has more to do with the hungry ghost realm. But the thing is also, it's a mix of these various realms. They're a mix, of course, all the various causes and conditions. But I think covetousness is more about the hungry ghost condition. But I'm glad, by the way, that you say correlation, because also we definitely, in understanding this reference to future lives, it's important we don't fall into some sort of theistic idea that's seen as primitive. We do take into consideration, of course, the whole complexity of cause, condition before an effect comes. And as such, we would already be living it now. The moment that we act on a particular impulse, such as covetousness, greed, or aggression, we're already living in that condition somewhat. What is one is writing about? That's a good question, gosh, yeah. What if one is writing about these afflictions in the form of a story? Yeah, I worry sometimes some of these authors who really write gore, right? And it's a place where it's got to sit within you. Let's hope they're writing it with intense compassion, and there is a motivation to enable the audience to abstain from aggressive and neurotic action. Yeah. Yeah, you're not actually, it's not it's the same also with movies, with computer games and all of that, It unfortunately seems to be sowing some seeds, yeah? We don't have sutras that particularly identify the harmful effects of computer games, but there in there you are obviously continually taking out your opponent, right? So there used to be one called Sim City, do you remember, for your kids? Where you build a town, you you make houses, you make schools, you make, shops and so forth, I don't know if they still do that. It seems to be a lot of Fortnite and all these killing games happening. But anyway, yeah, look at us, how we're fascinated by, Agatha Christie, right? And, what's it called? Midsummer Night Murders and whatnot. So I don't think it has the same effect, obviously, but still, it's more sort of in the realm of idle chatter, sort of pointless entertainment. So, wrong views. This is a big one. The objective basis of wrong views is infallible doctrines, such as the law of karmic causality. When assertions like those made by nihilists, one perceives such doctrines as false and desires to deprecate them, motivated by one of the afflictions. Now, this, of course, is written in a Buddhist context. And so what we're talking about, somebody who would despise the Buddhist teaching and say, there's no such a thing as past and future lives, there's no such a thing as the result of actions, and so forth. So that's in a Buddhist context. So that's typically how you would define wrong view, is not appreciating or understanding cause and effect, past and future lives. In the present context, it very much also is part of the discourse of materialism, where it's like somebody says, it's so easy to wipe the floor with the simple-minded fundamentalists. But there's another doctrine that actually is much more insidious and negative, and it's the notion that there's nothing whatsoever. There's no purpose to our lives. There's nothing beyond what we can see. And above all, implicit in materialism, there's a notion of no real understanding of what consciousness is and its impact, what we do with our consciousness, how it affects us in our lives, and also beyond the demise of our physical body. And so that's where we presently, in the modern context, have a lot of wrong view, if you like, that falls into the nihilist category. So the execution comes when one believes these doctrines to be utterly false, meaning saying, Buddhism or whatever, it's all just religion, it's all just based on superstition and ignorance, yeah? And therefore confirming one's suspicions, so one then embraces that wrong view. The act is complete when one feels conviction about that. You join the skeptic society. You are a fundamentalist, card-carrying, materialist, nihilist, and so forth. And you're proud about it. So that's where you have this conviction about it. The fully ripened result of wrong views is rebirth in whichever of the low realms is most fitting, I guess, in terms of the particular kleshas. Remember the three lower realms, they're also premised on then the three basic kleshas: ignorance, which is the animal realm; desire, which is the hungry ghost realm; and aggression, which is the hell realm. The result that resembles its cause is ignorance of the genuine view. And so that this kind of conditioning ourselves leads to not encountering the genuine view. And with the genuine view, yes, this we could say is the Buddhist teaching, particularly Praticca Samutpada, understanding the mind, its nature, and how the confused mind works, how the unconfused mind works. But particularly, we do refer to the view in terms of, generally in Buddhism, understanding Praticca Samutpada, dependent arising. Now, because that also enables us to understand cause and effect, past, future lives, the teaching of wisdom, emptiness, as well as the teaching of cause and effect. So Praticca Samutpada is sort of the hub of all the Buddhist teaching, dependent arising. Now, ignorance of that, you'd say, well, gosh, that's like those who would say, you're only going to be saved if you believe in our God, and so be it that we're only a minority, or we're. But that's actually not when we say this in the Buddhist teaching, we're just meaning actually the vipassana of looking, because the moment that we're not caught up in cerebral fabrication and philosophy, then we actually notice that what we do has an effect. So with an awareness, with a greater awareness, we're more aware of what is happening in terms of our actions and interactions with the world, and also the nature of the world itself. So, of course, to have the genuine view as expounded by an enlightened one is very subtle and comes with a heritage of the teachings, both what we call the Dharma of transmission, all the teachings that we have gathered from Buddhist masters and from the Buddha, but also in terms of the transmission of experience, meeting somebody who is awake. But we would want to take this out of the understanding of just another doctrine, because what we're talking about is something that lies beyond doctrine, which is the awakening of the human condition, and not just awakening on Buddhist premises, but the falling away of any reference points and dualistic clinging at all. So that's where the genuine view is linked to something that exists as unconditionally authentic and true. I hope this makes sense. There's a lot to be said about this. But also from this point of view, we can appreciate having encountered the Buddhist teaching. As a dominant result, good and evil will be mistaken. And that also is the nature of acting without awareness of the world around us, is that we simply just don't know how good leads to happiness and evil leads to suffering. Similarly, when the 10 non-virtuous acts are classified in terms of their respective level of severity, and this is then general, all of the following are extremely severe, motivated by an intensely afflicted mindset to murder extraordinary persons, such as one's guru, which is serious from a spiritual point of view. Yeah, you don't murder your guru. Or one's parents, which is serious from a worldly point of view, or to deceive, steal from, and create divisions between two such persons, to insult them, or to harbor covetous or malicious attitude toward them. Likewise, to have sexual relations with someone holding the vows of discipline, or any other unacceptable partner, to lie and sow discord in order to create a schism within the Sangha, as Devadatta did, to assert that there is no such a thing as a foe destroyer, which is meaning here just means that there is no such a thing as the perfect human, if you like. There is no such a thing as somebody who has an unafflicted psychology. To kill a large animal motivated by a desire for its flesh and blood, to steal many things and those that are very valuable, and to delight in negativity without confessing and committing, to refrain from such action in the future. Such acts are extremely weighty, and the opposites of these acts are light. So we are bogged down by these kind of actions, then to refrain from them, these bring about a remedy. We could understand virtuous acts in terms of just abstaining from negative acts, but also the motivation behind is so important. So we also understand positive acts, this abstaining from negative actions, but also acting without the presence of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Yes, Padma. By way of explanation, the Bodhisattva Padma writes, the non-virtues and the 5 acts of immediate retribution, the 5 close and the 4 weighty acts, the 8 mistaken acts and severe misdeeds, even at the cost of your life, abandon even the most minor of these. The vows that are in harmony with the 10 virtues, those of the layman, novice, one-day retreatant, fully ordained monk, and others of individual liberation, also bodhisattva vows and those of secret mantra, embrace and safeguard the vows you have taken. If you desire liberation, safeguard them carefully, as you would your own life. The 5 close and 4 weighty acts, I'm not sure. I think the 4 weighty have something to do with ordination. I think the 5 and the 4 might have something to do with ordination. And also the 8, I'm not sure. I suspect the translator also wasn't quite sure. Otherwise, he might have put in a footnote. The 5 acts of immediate retribution, summing up, means that they are actually so negative that we don't even have an intermediate state. There's no bardo after we pass away, and that is killing a Buddha, drawing blood from an arhat, sleeping with a nun, or killing parents, or sleeping with a monk or whatever. There are some particular 5. I have a vague idea what they are, but anyway, all of these are then negative acts that are very that then through taking of the vows, then we then have the power of the virtue. And this is then what we uphold. Tsongtse Rinpoche, he'll make a point also about some vows are very easy to hold. For example, we might never go to I think Rinpoche gives examples of McDonald's or whatever, so to take a vow of that's not difficult is also okay. You could take a vow of not going to McDonald's on Tuesdays, and then that just having that vow, even if you never do go to McDonald's, then just taking that vow in itself already makes this something that you're upholding. So some sense of discipline in terms of what's having a direction in terms of what we want to do, and cutting out what we don't want to do has this power. So these vows we should safeguard. Jigme Lingpa continues, with a thorough understanding of the classifications just discussed, which pertain to acts and their respective results, examine your mind to clearly identify which of them is most dominant. Meditate until your interest and enthusiasm prompts you to think, alas, I've amassed an immeasurable amount of such negativity up until now, but since my acts have not been embraced with mindful awareness, I've wandered in a state of indifference. So we recognize what we have been doing, what we are prone to do, our habits, let's say aggression or greed or whatever, and we also see that we haven't actually done anything, haven't been proactive in this. We've just been tagging along with indifference or without direction. Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, like a barbarian, I never knew that I was accumulating karma. What a huge mistake. So, of course, we might not know that this actually really has an impact on us. But if we reflect and think about it, we can see this is not just superstition. We can see how we're driven by a particular narrow psychological frame of mind and how that becomes part of us. Specifically, when we act on it, it becomes more and more part of us, and we can see that. As represented by the 10 non-virtues, from here on out, whenever a negative mindset occurs, whether subtle or coarse, I will apply an antidote and turn the other way. I'll do something about it. Yet this alone will not suffice. I will also work courageously to practice the opposite of such negativity, virtue. I will arouse diligence so intense that it is as though my hair or clothes are on fire, and I will apply myself to the 10 virtuous actions, such as renouncing killing. So we can have that, and it's good to have a little bit of courage in terms of our demands on ourselves. I was reading yesterday in Palter Rinpoche's Enlightened Vagabond, is what's it called again? Enlightened Vagabond, and where somebody overheard him practicing, and he was talking to himself, and he was saying, "Palter, gosh, your practice is just ridiculous," and and I think, and then other times they could hear him say, "Okay, this was kind of okay," but to be without falling into a neurotic sort of self-deprecation sense of unworthiness, it's also okay to be courageous in terms of saying, I will do this, I will practice intensely. Of course, the common sense is, okay, well, obviously we're going to balance it. So we would want to arouse diligence as intense as it described here, but we also don't want it to be something where we snap. So we could also, with the intention to arrive at great diligence, we could begin what Longchen Rinpoche very often describes as a skillful means in small increments, a bit like if we're becoming an alcoholic. So we first begin with a little sip, and then we like it, and then a bit more and a bit more, and then it really catches on, and we can become a very good alcoholic then. But if we just down half a bottle of rum, and I speak from experience as a teenager, then you puke and you never again actually want to drink rum. So we would similarly also, we would want to arrive at great diligence, but we want to do it skillfully. But it is, obviously we can see in the lives of those who really have been able to benefit others, they have practiced with tremendous diligence. We just have to do it according to what actually effectively works on us. The Master Vasubandhu once wrote, because observable phenomena and so forth will be experienced, there are 3 definite types. Yeah, so there we have, I think, 3 kinds of dispositions. Let's see. There are stories of evil people like Devadatta, Shasarakisha, Sridhara, and others who committed such extremely negative acts that they had conscious experience of going to hell without leaving their bodies behind. Such evil people have created karma that's sure to bring them rebirth in the lower realms. Unless you are such a person, you should think, alas, to attain liberation and omniscience, one needs to completely do away with the very roots of such non-virtue. But if I think about it, in this lifetime alone, I have consciously amassed so much negativity, and this doesn't reflect even a fraction of what I've accumulated in my previous lives. It's only logical that I've amassed an inconceivable amount of negativity for the sake of my friends, students, subjects, community, and so on. What's more, the results of these acts will be experienced by me alone. These acts that I've consciously committed cannot be shared with anyone else. So we would have inevitably engaged in negative actions in this life, and we can then infer, or we can sort of logically deduct that if we've done it in this life, we would have done it in other lives. And this could have been done in all sorts of contexts for ourselves or for those, but it is a negativity that stays with us. Nagarjuna explains, do not commit negative acts for Brahmins, monks, gods, guests, your parents, queens, or companions, for there will be no one with whom to share the result when it ripens as a rebirth in hell. So we might actually engage in negative acts for others, whatever they might be, but they are negative acts, and we might justify it thinking, oh, I'm doing this for others, but we should realize that it's not going to really land on anyone except ourselves. That being so, you may think to yourself, oh no, not me. not me. It looks like once I passed away, I'll have no choice but to endure the lower realms. Inevitably, you will sink into despair, and it is at this moment you will realize the implicit harm of karmic consequences. So, without falling into a very unconstructive depression, there should be a place where we're a little bit impressed by the potential negativity of negative acts. Nowadays, people merely pay lip service to virtue and non-virtue without directly recognizing the most basic principles concerning what they should do and not do. In this sense, they are hardly better than barbarians. So this, of course, talks about the general Buddhist populace who, of course, know about virtue and non-virtue, but, just do what we very often do across every culture and every human. Just think, oh, yeah, well, this will be okay. Yeah. So this is being no better than barbarians. This is being ignorant in terms of our actions. In truth, this is nothing more than a state of apathy. Due to the kindness of our enlightened teachers, however, we now see that our actions and their results do not just disappear. How fortunate. So now we know things don't just go away. It isn't enough, however, simply to see that and become fearful and withdrawn. With the four powers complete, and that's the ones we were talking about before, the power of support, the power of regret, the power of the vow, and the power of the application. You need to confess earnestly and restrain yourself with a firm sense of regret for what you have done. You should then devote yourself to enlightened activities. Our teacher, with his great compassion and skillful methods, said that if you do not err in terms of what you do and not do, past negativity can be purified through earnest confession and self-restraint, even if one has engaged in extremely violent acts in the past, such as those with immediate retribution. So this is where it says that, this is where we say that there's the one positive aspect of negative actions is that they can be purified. So, Letter to a Friend, Nagarjuna's work, states, one without conscience in the past, who later on became conscientious, is a thing of beauty, like the moon revealed by parting clouds, as was Nanda, Angulimala, Darshaka, and Udayana. So the word confession in Tibetan is shakpa, which actually means to part, and it more than so it could be helpful. And I know I see this from the Padmakara translations. The word parting is then simply that they're not part of us. We can leave them. So there were negative actions and we have left them. And this again is what is seen as something that's tremendously beautiful. In the case of Nanda and Angulimala, I know the story. I don't know the last two, but Nanda was incredibly obsessed with desire. He could let that go. And Angulimala also intensely angry and did a lot of negative actions, murdered many people, and yet completely abandoning that and embracing the path became somebody worthy of respect. Okay, here we have it actually. Okay, we have the stories. No, let's just see if there's any questions. Okay, so Ngondro question. I can contact with my instructor Ngondro. I sent message from the webpage of Ngondro 2 months ago. How can I do? I would just keep badgering your instructor. Don't give up. If all else fails, if you have a name for this one, then write to the administrator and say so-and-so is not responding. But don't give up. And sometimes some instructors probably get quite a bit of email, so sometimes it slips. I know this has happened to me, or a very long time goes without answering, for which I apologize to everyone. But I would say don't give up. Just keep. If you sent a mail 2 months ago and you haven't written since, I would send another one. Yeah. Send one at least every week until the person answers. Just say one of the instructor's colleagues said to do that. And if there's no response, just go to the administrator. Okay. Okay, no other questions? All right, well then I'll just read the last few minutes. I'll read the story of Ananda and Angulimala. The Buddha's relative Nanda was extremely attached to his wife, Pundarika. Tsongsa Rinpoche actually tells, and it's probably in the scriptures also, that they were spending all the time in bed together, and he couldn't bear to leave her. And when he just had to get out of bed, she would lick her finger and smear the saliva on his forehead and said, "Honey, be back before the saliva dries." Such were these young lustful people, Nanda and his wife Pundarika. To address this situation, the Tathagata, the Dasgone, skillfully led him both to a divine city and to hell. This tamed Nanda's desire, and he eventually became a foe destroyer. So the Buddha taught him a thing or two about the cause and effect. And Angulimala killed 999 people, and Ajatashatru killed his father Bimbisara, Aya. Though they had committed acts of immediate retribution, they were purified through confession, in the sense of parting from these patterns, and restraint, and both later attained level of foe destroyers. Udayana killed his own mother, but from that moment on, he regretted what he had done and began to behave in a morally correct manner. He ended up being born in a hell for as long as it takes to throw a silk ball. He later attained the level of a stream enterer. So accordingly, as soon as you recall such negative actions, you should cultivate a sense of regret and exert yourselves in the methods of confession. This is a most profound point. You should train in the recitation of the sutra in 3 parts. In the Vajrayana, we have then the practice of Vajrasattva. But I'll see if I can find this. If I can find it, I'll upload it to the reading folder. Furthermore, in the context of these instructions, failure to recognize the aforementioned 10 non-virtues and their corresponding results must be avoided. So we need to know what they are, and we need to recognize what they are. We need to not recognize them. Whenever these come to mind, the antidote is to recite the sutra in 3 parts while adhering to the vital points of the 4 powers. Alternate meditating on these two practices over and over again. From now on, be mindful and aware of all non-virtue and crush any negative thoughts as soon as they arise. So crush here again doesn't have any kind of unhealthy connotation in terms of suppression or psychologically unhealthy actions, but there's more to be onto it. It's just to be aware. And that once we're aware of something, it doesn't actually, it can't take the darkness goes away in the light. As soon as there's the recognition, it doesn't stay. So we're onto it. So that's what we mean with crush. It's just that it doesn't get away. In the context of the main practice, always follow the example set by Atisha Dipkamkara. Confess in the morning the negativity that you accumulate in the morning, and confess at bedtime the negativity that you accumulate in the afternoon. Don't let negativity or downfalls stay with you for even a day. So it's important with negative actions that they don't fester, in our all ground, if you like, that there's not something that becomes part of us. The quicker that we acknowledge something negative we've done and we clear it, the less impact it has on us. It doesn't mean that we can't purify things of the past, but it's really proportionate to the time that we let it fester, that it sits, becomes part of us. Some people take this to mean that simply confessing in this manner is enough. With this understanding, they behave wantonly with no sense of restraint when it comes to immoral behavior and non-virtue. However, it is a great mistake to think that merely reciting a few words of confession morning and night will suffice, for doing so will overwhelm the confession outline above, in which one confesses with a remorseful attitude using the four powers. So it will also result in the instant degeneration of the mindset of restraint, when one thinks, I won't do this again, even if it costs me my life. So it's important that when we confess, we really mean it, and that it doesn't just become lip service. Otherwise, then our practice of purification weakens. It just becomes a cliche and something that loses its strength. Of course, if that happens, then also doesn't mean that we can't address that, but it's just to understand the dynamic of this. But there is in Tibet they will often make fun of the Eastern Tibetans, the Kampas, who would rob and so forth and plunder as they went on pilgrimage to central Tibet, to Lhasa, and then in front of the sacred statue in Lhasa, then they would confess and then consider that it had all been purified. It doesn't really work like that. We need to, the practice of purification itself has to be something that we also safeguard. Hence, this is a misguided belief that eclipses all the infallible doctrines concerning the interdependence of actions and their results, meaning to just be cavalier about confession. The terms and principles that have been presented thus far should be given serious considerations. If all worldly activities fail to repulse you, like food repulses someone with jaundice, what you have heard are just quotations and what you have read are just words. This will not allow your mind to reach the level of mastery. Okay, let's stop here. No questions? Okay, good. Welcome. All right. We'll conclude then for today. Thank you for joining. Through this virtue may all beings throughout existence awaken together, without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.